Welcome to the Tuesday St. Mark's Spark. We're coming a little bit earlier than normal today. It is April 20th. It is snowing outside. It is a crazy, crazy day. It is a reminder that winter is having its revenge 1 month into spring. So it is good to be with you all. It's good to dust off this driver's cap one more time before we get to the late fall in 6 months. But thought it'd be important to focus on something today as we are here 1/3 of the way through spring. We're going to be reading from Luke chapter 4, verses 31 through 37. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus has had a period of baptism. He's had a period of temptation. He has done signs and wonders and miracles. He has just gone to Nazareth, to his hometown, was rejected by his neighbors, his friends, extended family in his own town, in a synagogue. And here Jesus leaves and he goes, we're told, to a place called Capernaum, a city in Galilee. So listen now to this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between having a shouting voice and the difference between having a quiet authority, and what the difference is between power and authority. He went down to Capernaum, a city in Galilee, and was teaching them on the Sabbath. They were astonished at his teaching because he spoke with authority. In the synagogue there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, "Let us alone! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." When the demon had thrown him down before them, he came out of him without having done him any harm. They were all amazed. They kept saying to one another, "What kind of utterance is this? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and out they come." And a report about him began to reach every place in the region. May this God's word speak to our hearts, our minds, our spirits. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The world is loud. The world is loud. There's a story, it's anecdotal. I was not there to hear it. But the story was of a country pastor, and it was preaching, and it was preaching. He had 3 points, and the first point, the second point, the third point, someone came to him before, in a seminary student was asking the pastor, well, the first point and the third point have normal typeset, but you have underlined in the second point all this in bolded. Why did you do that? And the pastor said, well, that's where I raise my voice. That's where I shout. That's where I holler. And the young seminarian asked the pastor, said, well, why do you do it that way? And the pastor said, because that's my weakest point. I think in life, that's what we do sometimes. Those who shout the most, those who argue the most, those who add to the din and the cacophony that is around us, oftentimes the people who shout the most are the ones who have the poorest point or the weakest points. We must never confuse volume with authority. We must never confuse loudness with power. Now, Jesus, we're told, it talks about how Jesus in many ways was meek, and he was mild, he taught. We don't hear a whole lot about Jesus raising his voice, possibly with the exception of going into the temple and turning over the tables, but even that is perhaps debatable. The question is, Jesus was not loud. He didn't need to be loud. He didn't need to be loud because he spoke the truth. He reflected the light. And what we hear in Luke's gospel is Jesus is going into these places. He is making a name for himself, not by the volume of his voice, but by the power of his deeds. Now, we've all known people in our world who like to talk. I'm one of the people who like to talk. And sometimes as I get older, I've learned, hopefully, that God gave us two ears and one mouth, and we should listen twice as much as we speak. But also, there are people who hardly ever speak at all. And when those people do speak, it is with power, it is with authority, not because they raise their voice, but because of the things that they share. I think of an elder we had, one of the elders down in Alabama in Eufaula, and literally you'd go through an hour meeting or an hour and a half meeting, and he wouldn't say a word, and then maybe with 5 minutes left to go in the meeting, he would give his insight on something, and I kid you not, everyone would stop. They would turn, they would listen, and generally that insight carried the day. Generally, that insight was so powerful because this individual spoke so infrequently that when he did, everyone paid attention. He was a E.F. Hutton. When he spoke, everybody listened. And I think about that in our lives, that question of how we talk and how we exhibit. I mean, not just as Christians, but just as human beings, just as citizens of this planet. Are we trying to bully people into submitting to the volume of our words? Or are we careful with what we say so that when we do say it, it carries a greater authority? Jesus had really strong words in condemnation for anybody who tried by the volume or by the sheer amount of their words that tried to persuade people. Jesus said that those are for the religious hypocrites that make their factories long, make their stoles of their robes long, or the symbols long to show how important they are. It made their prayers interminable. They went on forever. Jesus kept saying over and over, this is not how you're supposed to be. Pray, and when you do, pray simply. If you don't know what to pray, pray the Lord's Prayer. But also, if someone asks you a question, Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything else comes from the evil one. Don't swear by heaven because it's God's throne, or the earth because it's God's footstool. Don't swear on the gifts in the temple. Don't even swear on the temple. Just live a life in such a way that just your yes has authority, or just your no has authority. Jesus comes into this town. There is a man with an unclean spirit. We are told that this man with the unclean spirit, this unclean demon, he cries out with a loud voice. Again, this is the volume. You'll see this on cable news as well. The people who try to carry the day by the way they raise their voices. And he yells out, let us alone. Not let me alone, let us alone. There are many demons here. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. It's interesting, the demonic forces in Jesus' world could recognize him, could recognize his authority far more than his disciples, or generally the people who were around him. So they're shouting at Jesus, but Jesus rebuked them, saying, it doesn't say Jesus raised his voice. Jesus simply rebuked them, saying, be silent and come out of him. Be silent and come out of him. I think about all the cacophony in the world. I think about, in many ways, how anxious our minds can be at times. All the noise we have externally, but also internally. Maybe we just need to hear Jesus, the one with power, the one with authority, the one who backs up what he says with what he does. Maybe we need to hear Jesus say today, be silent. And may these things that are unclean, may they come out of you. Be silent, and may these anxieties be taken from you. Be silent, and may this need to try to justify yourself be removed from you. Be silent. And maybe in there here, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I will be exalted in the nations. Be still. And maybe for us, in that stillness, we will learn when we need to speak and when we need to keep silent. We will learn that our authority comes not in our volume, but in our actions, in living out who we claim to be and whose we claim to be and who has claimed us. So may I encourage you to be still, to be silent, to know that it is not in the volume of your voice, but it is in your words that are backed up with your actions, your words of love that are backed up with actions of love, your words of forgiveness that are backed up with actions of forgiveness, your words of generosity which are backed up with living a generous and caring life. Be silent, be still, and in that silence and stillness, may you hear the Lord speaking to you again. I pray that God is with you on this snowy April 20th. I pray God's blessing with you the rest of this week and as we move forward. May God be with you all.